When we differentiate between animals and plant cells, what are some of the major characteristics you could look for in a plant cell that would tell you that it is a plant cell and not an animal cell? There are a couple of things on this diagram that should stand out to you that look very different compared to animal cells. When we draw animal cells, we always draw them as round, with structures on the inside, the organelles. Now, many of the organelles with our animal cell will be the same as the ones here. We'll have mitochondria, kind of shaped like a kidney bean, with lots of surface area on the inside that we use for cell respiration. We'll have Golgi, ribosomes, microtubules in our animal cell as well. We'll of course have a nucleus, an endoplasmic reticulum. We'll have all of these things inside an animal cell. Right? We'll have other things inside an animal cell as well, something called a lysozyme. Lysozyme. Remember, those were our garbage trucks, so they'll be used to help us dispose of waste and recycle nutrients. But we don't see those here. The other thing that we typically see is a very flexible outer membrane to our animal cell. Right? We don't see that here. Instead, we see things like chloroplast. Well, there's no chloroplast in my animal cell. We know that chloroplasts are a distinguishing feature of plant cells and that they are needed in photosynthesis. We have this central vacuole, this big blob in the middle of our plant cell. In this case, we talk about our central vacuole associated with water storage, nutrient storage, and they actually will take the place of our lysozymes, so they also act as a garbage truck. Plasmodesmata, this is another weird one, associated just with plants. We see this as the connection between two plant cells. Kind of looks like a button here, right? Well, what we're actually seeing is the overlapping of the plasma membrane between two plant cells. So the plasma membrane still exists, of course, in plant cells, helps to regulate what comes in and out. And so what we see is actually an overlap of that material to hold these cells together and make them rigid. Well, what else is on the outside here? The outside of our plant cell, of course, has a cell wall. In plants, we look at that primarily being composed of cellulose. We saw cell walls in prokaryotes as well, different kind of composition, but the cellulose is important in our cell walls. It's what we equate with dietary fiber. You cannot digest cellulose. What we look for is its job in digestion to help you actually clean out your system. So those are the major components that we see here. We'd still have cytoplasm filling the inside of the cell and so on. But just like this is the basic cell structure for a plant. We can certainly look at other structures depending on the exact cell type that we see in our plants. So we want to look at actually 5 major types of plant cells. And those 5 major types of plant cells I've listed out for you right here. They have some odd names associated with them, so you have the spellings here. Parenchyme cells, or parenchyma, depending on how you pronounce it, collenchyme or collenchyma. sclerenchyme or sclerenchyma, water conducting cells that we've already talked about as being vascular tissue, and food conducting cells that are also known as vascular tissue and build vascular tissue. So we said our water conducting cells are actually xylem, right? And our food conducting cells are phloem. We saw that in our tissue discussion. But when we look at plant cell types, we have to think these cells will make up the tissues, right? That's the job of the cells, is to build tissues. So since we're familiar with the vascular cells, and we'll come back to those again later, I want to focus instead on our parenchyme, collenchyme, and sclerenchyma cells. So our parenchyme cells are actually the most abundant cells that we see in the cell's structures and in the plant structures. So we see these throughout the majority of the plant. They tend to be very thin cell wall. This will be one of our identifying characteristics of a cell type, is how thick that cell wall is. And then what's their job? Well, the job of a parenchyme cell is to do all of the metabolic work of the plant. So anything associated with energy. So in that case, we're going to be talking about photosynthesis, cell respiration, right? All of these things. Now, we also have to think about the fact that parenchyme cells, if they're involved in metabolic processes, will also be involved in any plant growth. Here, they show you a picture of parenchyme cells storing starch. Again, a great task for them because the cell walls are thin and they can get a lot of starch stored on the inside. These are your collenchyme cells. Notice that it has a fairly thick cell wall. In this image on the right, the dark space that surrounds the white are actually the cell walls. The open white spaces are the insides of the cells. So the cell walls surrounding the outside. So you see that they're thicker. They're not necessarily even. And the reason for this is they actually have a primary cell wall and a secondary cell wall associated with them. This gives them more support, so they're a stronger cell than the parenchymes that we just talked about, but they still are flexible. So we look at collenchyme cells as being present in areas of growth. So any place the plant is growing, you're going to see a lot of these cells to help give it support. The last type of plant cell that we're going to talk about is the sclerenchyme cells. So these are actually two different types of cells, fibers and sclerids. So when we look at these two different types, they'll have different functions in the plants. And we're going to use all of these cells in our future discussions of plants to talk about their major functions and where they will actually fit in to what's going on with our plant in a given time frame and how it's actually working. So the one last image I want to show you that we'll come back to when we talk about our vascular tissue more is this cross-section of a stem or cross-section of a vascular bundle, showing you the difference between the xylem and the phloem. And we'll get into more about these structures associated with the xylem and phloem later on. But when we look at these sieve tubes, these are associated with food movement, so sugar. Which cells in the vascular tissue or which component of the vascular bundle did we say was primarily associated with food?